In the 1960s, some cars had a feature that could decapitate you in a crash. And that's not even the craziest thing on our list. Seat belts that choke you, steering wheels that impale you, and bumpers filled with water. These are some of the automotive designs gone wrong. So get ready, because in this video we count down 10 of the strangest and even dangerous car features ever invented. Number 10. Neck seat belts. In the 1960s, you're cruising down the highway, and instead of a regular seatbelt, you've got what feels like a fancy scarf wrapped around your neck. Sounds comfy, right? Wrong. Some genius car manufacturers thought, hey, you know what would prevent whiplash? Strapping people's heads down. So they came up with neck seatbelts. These were experimental seatbelts that wrapped around your neck instead of your chest. The idea was to hold your head and neck in place during a crash. Now, I don't know about you, but the last thing I want in a car accident is something yanking on my neck. These neck belts could cause serious neck injuries or even strangulation. Thankfully, this idea was removed pretty quick. By the late 1960s, everyone realized that maybe choking drivers wasn't the best safety strategy. They switched to shoulder belts and headrests instead. You know, things that actually work. Number 9. Wrist twist steering system. In the mid-1960s, Mercury decided that steering wheels were just too wheelie. So they came up with a wrist twist steering system. Instead of a wheel, you got two small dials, one for each hand. The idea was to improve visibility and make driving more comfortable. No more wheel blocking your view of the gauges. Plus, you could drive with your arms on the armrest like some kind of lazy boy recliner on wheels. But trying to control a car with what essentially amounts to two oversized volume knobs is about as easy as trying to eat soup with a fork. Drivers found it confusing and counterintuitive. Imagine trying to make a sharp turn by twisting your wrist like you're opening a stubborn jar lid. Not exactly intuitive, is it? Safety concerns quickly arose. In a crash, there was nothing substantial for the driver to brace against. Plus, the lack of resistance in the dials meant drivers had less feedback about what the car was doing. Needless to say, this twist on steering didn't last very long. By the 1970s, the wrist twist system had spun its way into the history books, leaving us with the good old steering wheel. Number 8. Propeller-driven cars. Back in the 1930s and 40s, some folks thought, you know what cars need? Airplane propellers. So they strapped aircraft propellers onto cars. It's like someone watched too many Looney Tunes cartoons and thought, yeah, that looks safe. These cars, like Marcel Liot's Helica, were supposed to bring the thrill of flight to the open road. But these propeller-driven cars were not practical at all. The exposed rotating blades were just a nightmare waiting to happen. One wrong move and you could slice and dice anything unfortunate enough to get too close. Plus, these cars handled about as well as a shopping cart with a jet engine. Unsurprisingly, this idea crashed and burned. By the 1950s, people realized that maybe, just maybe, giant spinning blades and public roads don't mix. Who would have thought? Number 7. Pop-out windshields. Now here's a feature that sounds like it came straight out of a James Bond movie. In 1948, the Tucker Corporation introduced pop-out windshields. Yep, you heard that right, windshields that could pop out of the car. The idea was that in case of an accident, the entire windshield would pop out in one piece, giving passengers an escape route. Kind of like having an ejection seat, but for your windshield. Tucker used a special rubber gasket that would allow the windshield to pop out cleanly. Sounds pretty clever, right? Well, not so fast. While the intention was good, the execution left a lot to be desired. For starters, in a severe crash, the last thing you want is your main protection against flying debris suddenly deciding to take a vacation. Plus, there was the small issue of occupants potentially being ejected through the very opening that was meant to save them. Imagine surviving a crash only to find yourself launched through the windshield like a human cannonball. Not exactly the grand exit that most people are looking for. By the 1950s, advancements in safety glass made pop-out windshields obsolete. Turns out, keeping the windshield firmly attached to the car was a better safety strategy.